Get started. It's about just after 3:15, and Dr. Eli Goldblatt, he's not here right now, but hope that he's coming in too. Okay, thank you all very much for coming to this session. My name is Young Hyung Min. I'm an instructor in the program for writing and rhetoric at the University of Colorado Boulder. So welcome to Boulder, everybody. This is kind of my hometown. I just moved to Boulder from Washington, learning many things myself. So I'll be introducing these three facilitators. Dr. Paul Feigenbaum, as you all know, he's an associate professor at Florida International University. His research teaching and interests include community literacy, service learning, and public writing, college access, and civic engagement pedagogy. His essays have appeared in Reflections and Community Literacy Journal, and also Composition Forum. And his recent book, The Collaborative Imagination, Earning Activism Through Literacy Education, is also available from the Southern Illinois University Press. Dr. Eli Goldblatt is a professor of English at Temple University, where he served as the university writing director for a decade. He's the director of the New City Writing and Outreach arm of the university writing program, focused especially on North Philadelphia. For nearly a decade, he has served on the board of Treehouse Books as a non-profit literacy center in the neighborhood near the university campus. His books in the field include Because You Believe, and sponsoring literacy beyond the college curriculum. There was the winner of the National Council of the Writing Program Administrators, the Best Book Award in 2008. Writing Home, a literacy autobiography, was also published in 2012 by the Southern University Illinois Press. And Tiffany Rousseau, she's an associate professor of English at Salt Lake Community College, where she teaches composition and also linguistics. She's the founding director of the Writing Across the College program and founded the Salt Lake Community Writing Center in 2001. She has been directing the center for nearly a decade, and she has been publishing widely on community writing and also community publishing in multiple journals. So she's the author of the book Rhetoric of Respect, Recognizing and Changing at a Community Writing Center. She's also co-author with Stephen Parks and Paula Matthew of Circulating Communities, the Tactics and Strategies of Community Publishing. So ladies and gentlemen, please welcome these three facilitators, and I'll be working around and passing out the microphones at the end of the session. Okay, thank you.
So welcome everyone. So here's a tip. If you want people to come to your panel, get on a panel with the two keynote speakers the entire conference. Awesome. So thank you for coming. I'm just going to go over our intentions for what we're doing today. I made some copies of this, but there's not enough. Again, get on their panels. So it's up here for you. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to talk about what we're intending to do with this time. Not going to take very long with that. I can pass this around. Yeah, if you want to. There's not enough. You might want to share. Then Paul is going to sort of outline our process of how we're going to interact with each other. I'm going to give the broad form, and then Paul's going to talk about the strategies. And then we're going to go into basically what we're trying to do is obviously we've had a lot of talk at this conference about that tension between wanting to do this work and wanting to have a career. And so spend many years of trying to figure out how do we define this so that it's validated by our institutions and those who fund us. So instead of turning this into a dirge of complaints about why it doesn't work, our group wanted to talk about what has worked and try to frame a sense of what community literacy can be, how we can define it, so that we can then take that to our home institutions and advocate for ourselves. Did that just go out? Sorry. Okay, so then what we'll do at that point is we're each going to take just a few minutes to talk about our stories of success. The three of us have built fairly successful careers doing this work, so we're going to talk about very briefly how we did that. Then we're turning the work over to you. And I will have Paul explain how we're going to do that in just a moment. Then we're going to come back together, we're going to do flip charts and all that stuff. And then we'll come together, hopefully having some more developed sense of what community literacy can be that we can take to our home institutions.
Hi. So if you attended my talk yesterday, you heard me going on about appreciative inquiry, and I don't want to bore you with the details of what that's all about today. The term really isn't all that important, maybe a little new age sounding. The important thing is the idea, which is talking about what makes us energized and inspired to do this work, which is the part that I think is so easily lost when we're talking about struggles, challenges, obstacles, these kinds of things. So I want us to ideally spend our time here sharing stories, hopefully all of us sharing stories about what things are like when they are actually working well, when we are all at our best, when our communities are at our best, when our projects are at our best, when the organization is at our best. And my hope here is, since our goal at the conference is to build engaged infrastructure, which is a process that is certainly going to extend beyond the time that we're here, at the very least, we could begin a process that is associated in AI with discovery, which they call kind of mapping out a positive core. The positive core is what works well when an organization or a community is at its best. So think of the guiding question of this deep think tank. What is the positive core of community literacy? And the way to articulate that, to bring that out into the open, is for us to tell our stories of when we are at our best. What are our assets? What are our strengths? And how can we build on them in the future? That's the basic idea. And after each one of us kind of models that with a tale of our own success, of what we would call success, then we're going to break up into groups, and hopefully everybody here will have a chance to tell their story, and we'll put kind of basic themes on these flip charts, and then somebody, I guess a representative from each group, is going to come back and talk to the whole group, and hopefully we can start generating some common themes that I hope we can build on moving forward into tomorrow's kind of wrapping up how is this actually going to happen stuff.
One thing I just want to say before we talk is that I want to underline what Paul just said. I think one of the things that we're trying to get out of this is well, there are two things. One is that I hope everybody walks away with a little, maybe at least feeling a little better than maybe you felt when you came here about how you can build your personal career as well as your work. But I think what's really important about this conference is that we figure out what can an organization do for you. We're not building this organization just because we want to build another organization. We've got lots of damn organizations. What we want to do is figure out an organization that really will help people in their own careers and do the kind of work that they want to do. And I want to really underline this. There is a tendency in community literacy to feel guilty. I'll just use the word what the heck is it? No, you just use the word. I'm Jewish. Guilty about, well, how is it that I build my career in working with people who don't have power or privilege that I have? This is at the core of pretty much everything everybody in this room probably does. And I don't have an answer for that, except to say that on the one hand, you can't put that to bed because it is always there. On the other hand, if you let it stop you from doing what you want to do, then there's also a kind of luxury in that, right? In other words, there's a luxury in beating yourself up because you're so privileged, and then you don't do anything, right? So the important thing is to move forward with a certain kind of principle, understanding, and reflection of who you are, where you are at every moment. That's I guess that'd probably be my short answer to that set of that conundrum. Okay, so a quick version is that I. How did I do what I did? John, maybe you can tell me. I think that, at heart, I think the thing is that I'm a teacher. I've been a teacher since 1977. I was working for a children's book warehouse after bouncing about through a few jobs, and I just decided, I'm sick of working for a living. I want to teach, And so it took me a long time to find a job because I didn't have a teacher's certificate. But I knew a lot about science, so I started teaching science in a little broken down school in West Philadelphia. I think that if I had to say what, to whatever extent I've had success, it's really been around that nub of teaching. Is that teaching in all different kinds of ways just kept being something that fed me and that I cared about, even though I think I must have been a terrible teacher for at least 2 or 3 years, if not well into my 40s. I don't know, because when I first started teaching, I thought that teaching was just performance, and as you can see, I can tell a joke. But so it wasn't until about my 2nd or 3rd year that I realized that all my students were doing was watching me, and that most of them were just stoned. And that I was just really fun to go to class after dinner, after lunch, because so that's when I started realizing that teaching was really a job. And you had to start thinking not about what you said, but what they felt and what they learned. And it's taken me this long to figure out some way. And then, very, very luckily, I met my wife, who is just one of the best teachers I know. So we've had that at the heart of our relationship for 34 years. And that has helped me move forward. So, really everything I've done is really built off of a commitment and love of this thing called teaching. And there were an awful lot of distractions in all this. But I think holding on to things that, for better or worse, even if they revile us, teaching is still a useful thing to do in society. And I think if you could, so even the people who don't like what you do or who look down on you or any of that kind of stuff, I think that I could go back to my classroom and think about my teaching and build my career off of that. And I think that's, probably that's at the heart of what helped me keep going and find new jobs. And certainly when I was a graduate student, it's really what made me decide to do Comp Red is, as I was getting more and more disenchanted with modernist poetry, criticism, and I just wanted the literary critics out of my writing room, I thought, well, what's the thing that I like doing best? And it was my comp class. So, and I think that a lot of people in Comp Red have that experience. So I think, let me stop there, because if that's okay, and I'm happy to answer questions and stuff.
Again, so success. I think my story of success is, I kind of talked about it yesterday, but when I went on the job market, which was 2007, 2008, I wanted to position myself as a community literacy practitioner. And the fact that was even possible was because of previous successes that had already occurred from people like Eli Goldblatt, who made it possible for slightly younger people to get jobs doing this kind of work. but I went into a program in South Florida that had no infrastructure, no institutional history really of doing this kind of work. And I had to kind of start from scratch. But I didn't have to start from scratch because there is in fact a lot of great work happening in South Florida. And one thing I learned is that it is a mistake, this is maybe the great lesson from Paula Matthews' work, it is a mistake when universities come up with ideas for projects that they want to do and then go out in the community to try and find people who want to do those, who might work with them and dictate to them when there's already so much great work happening in the community. And that's the smartest thing I did. Well, there were a couple smart things I did. One was to have the courage to introduce myself to people like Eli who became mentors. The second thing was to try and go out into the community that I didn't know anybody in and try to talk to people and find out the great work that was already happening. And that's where I met partners who I could then learn from and do the thing that I had to do. The third thing that was really important was I chose a place, I really forced myself, I challenged myself to do something I didn't know that I could do, which was to write a book and get it published, and to do it in 6 years. And that if you could say that there's only a few items on my bucket list, that was one of them. And I forced myself into a situation where I had to face that challenge. And the only reason it worked is because I met people like Carlos and Alex over there. Could you raise your hand? Who are doing amazing things in the community, and I learned from them, and I built what I learned into the book. And I got lucky in terms of timing. Serendipity, I talked about it yesterday, was a big part of all this. And I don't want to deny that. But I think it is possible when you go into a community and instead of having the attitude that I'm going to recreate the wheel, and to some extent I guess I had to recreate the wheel in my department where there wasn't community work happening. But in terms of the actual community itself, there was plenty of great work happening. Tapping into those networks. Because those of you who are graduate students, you may find yourself getting a PhD in a year or two, and then you're going to be in a completely brand new place. You might get lucky and go someplace where you already know people, but in many cases, like mine, you're going to end up someplace totally foreign, and you're going to be facing a ticking clock. So find the great work that's already happening and build trust with them, and then build the work around them. And that's what I think can make things successful.
Okay, so my story of success is going to be a slightly different lens. So I'm at a community college, and therefore I don't have the same publishing requirements that all of you at universities, especially R1 universities, have. So my story of success, I guess I wrote a book, and that was on my bucket list as well because I didn't do a dissertation. I want to do a dissertation, but I don't want to go to graduate school, so I wrote a book instead. But I don't want to talk about that. What I want to talk about is how the Community Writing Center succeeded. And I think there's two main things, I think. Paul's already mentioned, well, there's three. Paul mentioned one of them, whereas not going into the community thinking you know what you're doing. That I learned very early on is absolutely the wrong way to do it. Two things I want to talk about are, the first one is to be satisfied with the small. When people see the Community Writing Center, they see that it's big. And I don't know if you're familiar with it or not, but go look at slcc.edu/CWC. You'll see it's very, very big. But it was not always very big. It took me 3.5 years, 4 years to get it started. And then I worked on it for another almost 10 years before I turned it over. And so, but it started with just one small group. Actually, it started with a read my book. And that'll tell you what it started. But it started with a really good book. It really is. But so it started with just a relationship, like what Paul's talking about. Having a relationship, and a legitimate relationship that's not me as educator going into the community. It's somebody being interested in working with you, and what resources can I bring, and what resources can you bring, and what can we make together. So starting small, I think, is key, because a lot of the conversation I hear a lot is, well, how did you do that? Or how did you get there? Or I started this thing and I can't make it bigger. It's like, well, that's not the point. I mean, the point is to do good work that you're doing. Whether or not it turns into something big is irrelevant, because there's a responsibility not to take on too much as well. Because if you take on too much, then you let down more people than you would have held up if you kept it small. The second thing is to know that you will screw up over and over and over and over and over again, and to know that going into this kind of work, as in life, you're going to make so many mistakes, and you must be humble, and you must be willing to take those mistakes and go with them. If that's contrary to the academic world, because we have to carry our sense of expertise and our knowledge and our ability and our capability everywhere we go. I was in a panel, it was my panel, but a woman in the panel said that she was so embarrassed to show how many mistakes that she made in this project. And I thought, where are you? This is like the place where you make mistakes. So to not be afraid to make mistakes, to admit those mistakes, and then to go on. That's how we succeeded. Okay then, so here's what we want to do, okay? This mass of people has to make 4 groups. I don't know how you're going to do it. You're a community, figure it out, okay? So we want you in 4 groups. We've only got 4, well, we've got 4 pens, okay? So I have no idea how many people.
It is now 4:30, and I think there's some wonderful conversations, wonderful ideas, wonderful stories, and we want to give everybody a chance to share with the rest of the group what came up in your individual groups. So we have about half an hour for this, and then we wanted to spend 15 minutes hopefully drawing some broader conclusions from this. So with 7 groups, we'd like to give each group 3 or 4 minutes to share kind of the key ideas that came up in your individual conversations.
So who wants to go first?
Okay, we talked about a lot of stuff. I don't know maybe where to start, but something that came up consistently in our conversations about what sustains us and on different levels and different forms is the idea of relationships and having good relationships with colleagues, with students, having meaningful relationships, having relationships that make you feel like your own work is meaningful. What else? There was a lot of talk in our discussion as well about understanding who you are as a person and what you care about and what you love, and integrating that with your teaching in some way. And that's also a very sustaining principle to try to apply. And then we had a little bit of conversation about our lives and our struggles and what we can try to do to make our teaching easier, our teaching more effective. And one of the things that came up in terms of that was kind of understanding, how your place is set up, and understanding how you can use that understanding to get what you need, kind of playing a little bit of the political game perhaps. So we have this other idea that came up quite a bit, serendipity. And Maribel over here came up with an acronym. So let's try this. Students evolving, relationships, embracing mentors, braiding, validating, passions, building, connections, community.
Okay, and I think, Paul, you're taking notes, right? Okay, and then I think what we'll do is we'll work with Veronica to pull together the ideas from this and put it out on that forum. Okay, so who wants to go next? Okay, this group is going. Okay, this group is going.
We're not being communal about it. You just do it. show you our mascot. We had a mascot. That's Charlie the cat, so she represents joy. Right? It's the part of the afternoon where you all just want your pet. I did too. So we talked about many of the same things that this group talked about with regard to what brings us joy. And then we talked a lot about trying to leverage existing institutional mechanisms and classifications and categories for evaluation to recognize the stuff that gives us joy, to get it to count. Initiatives, QEP things for people familiar with that, SACS kind of institutional evaluation mechanism, Carnegie classifications for community engagement. And when that isn't available for work that we do, we talked about when you lie. When you say you're doing something else, you don't tell key people what you're doing. And that is a professional preservation strategy. And I think, am I missing anything else? Super, thanks.
Okay, so again, we've talked about a lot of different things here. As you see here, passion for people and justice, I think in long-standing relationships is important. Institutional support for work. These themes and challenging institutions to value community work. These, I think, 4 themes really kind of got at some of the political work that we're doing, as most in the group are doing in terms of the community, and how the odds in the community that we're up against are at times very overwhelming, right? And so just the energy that can come from the struggle, right? And being part of that, and actually having community members, at least in my experience and the experience of some people in the group, having partners who value that language, that discourse, and kind of define their work in those terms, has been very productive, right? And so there's a real sense of solidarity, I think, that comes from that. And so I think for a few, at least a number of us in our group, that was something that kept us moving forward. So it wasn't about winning, although that's happened a few times. It's just the ability to keep on keeping on under really difficult circumstances can be, that in and of itself can be pretty rewarding. Let's see here. Sometimes lip service of the administration is not supportive of already established relationships in the community. It sounds like a very negative thing, but we kind of were framing it, or trying to frame it as a positive in the sense of giving recognition to that, right? Being able to name that, acknowledge it, and work from there. That in itself can be a pretty liberating move. So we don't want to lose sight of that. I'm not sure. That was a great quote. Okay, so I'm trying to pick your battles. Okay.
Don't die on every hill.
All right. Being able to pick your battles. I'm trying to remember that conversation. We talked about a lot of great things. I'm going to blank on that one. Okay, go where you can go, go where you can do what you want to do. So really that idea of some of us in the group felt enough autonomy to be able to, in our work, to be able to do what we want to do, and not feeling the need to always have to legitimize ourselves in the eyes of our university, but just having the safe place to kind of do what we're doing, even if it's falling under the radar. It could be a productive kind of thing at certain times. So I think that was part of that. And this right here, being subversively play the game and do the work that that compels you. So this idea of just being subversive, right? By playing the game, doing what you have to do, but you can still find those moments where you're being subversive to do what it is that you really want to do. Under the radar, it can be very important, and as long as you're doing it in a way that you're following your bliss, right? You're following still what you want to do. It's really important. integrating teaching, community engagement, and scholarship. And this right here is, I guess, a holistic approach, right? I think all of us kind of think of it this way, is that the work that we do in the community is service, it's teaching, and it's scholarship for a lot of us, right? And being able to make the case for that in terms of our promotional materials, I think is something that we value. And I think a number of us in our institutions are increasingly valuing that. And so at least being able to make those arguments when we go up for promotion or when we seek to get those kind of formal recognitions within our university, I think those opportunities are out there. And I think there's those of us in our group who've had that success and that experience. So am I leaving anything else out from our group? Thank you.
Should have volunteered to go first because now everyone's already said everything. I know it's like student groups, right? So opportunities to help others. Obviously, what came up in our group was building programs, because some of us talked about building programs that can be sustained over long term, but then handing them off to other people. I'm not as good at that because I'm a control freak, but recognizing what we're good at, so building on our own strengths and knowing also where our weaknesses lie. Community building, so also through this work helping students see themselves as part of the communities in which they're going to school, because often students feel apart from those communities. And connecting people, so that's important, obviously. This group talked about subversion, and we frame that in terms of resistance and being an inconvenience to our institutions. That we're constantly needling and nudging, and we're the adjutants that want recognition, but also want them to ethically have to support what we do. And then changing the system from within, so that's the subversion, and seeing things go from dream to reality. So with with projects that you dream about, and then all of a sudden you get the money and you have to actually go do them, but then realizing that, I built this, that's kind of cool. And then, handing it over to somebody else, which I also said I'm not good at. And then the idea of giving back, and what our whole table when we went around, it was always we. Nothing was really ever framed in terms of I, which I think is important to all of this work that we're doing.
Sure. Okay, so I'm going to try to figure out what's new on this list. We have changing status quo, resistance. One theme that we really circled around a lot at the beginning was this idea of reinvention and reflection. We're in our group of coming at this work at various points in our careers, some of us along the tenure track at various points in our thinking about how we're reinventing who we are, who we thought we were, and how community literacy work fits into that. Some of us are coming at it as soon to be on the job market or on the job market doctoral students who are thinking about what will the place that they end up being at do to their sense of self and who they are and the kind of work they do, and how will they reinvent. And so reflection is obviously central to that. We have a commitment to the work. We were talking a bit about the connections between micro and macro. I think we tended to initially focus a lot on the sort of local communities that we're working in, that some of us brought to the table connections we have to community literacy work beyond our immediate communities. And what does that teach us? What does that mean to be a community literacy scholar who feels more connected to people who are on other sides of oceans as opposed to people who are down the street, and sort of grappling with that. And we ended our conversation and didn't really get to delve into it full force with conversations about privilege and race and who is at our gathering and who is not at our gathering, and kind of what that meant to various people's careers, how we knew that colleagues who do this work who maybe not here factor that into their own careers, and what that means to the broader discipline of community literacy. I'll put that in circles. Yeah.
So just to let you know, I'm going to collect all of these and I'll type them all up and we'll add it to the situation.
We have a lot of similar ideas. Oh, thank you. Thank you so so much. So a lot of similarities that other groups have said, so I won't read them all, but I will say that we were all coming from different places. Some people teachers, some people students, both graduate and undergraduate, I need to point out. And even people who are new to the conversation or people who are long-term proponents of community literacy projects, we all found that we valued relationships quite a bit. So we talked a lot about feeling lonely in this work, but knocking on people's doors and finding people to connect with, finding mentors, finding people who could advise us on projects. So definitely relationships. We talked a bit about being subversive also. I'll sort of skip over some of these. And then just having a love of teaching was something that a lot of us shared. And talking about paying it forward. So seeing what needs are there and sort of paving the way for the next people to come.
Do I have it right? This is the last group. Everybody else is gone, right?
All right. So I think we had some commonalities with others, but we also told some really specific stories. Student and community ownership of work, values, and community. Okay. Witnessing success of students and community, creating spaces for others to experience your community and its successes and contributions. Crying is good. It doesn't sound like joy, but sometimes there is a joy in the emotions being allowed to be expressed. We talk about public celebrations of the work that's being done, and you know, the joy of watching it, particularly if we're working with young people, having them sort of publicly recognized and be in spaces where they're taken seriously as writers. And asking for help, as this group said, is really important. Courage is something that we realize that you need to do any of this work. Affinity, autonomy, love, accepting ups and downs, letting go, making peace with the process and that it will be up and down and up and down and up and down. Contributing to readiness was one of the phrases that we used for reframing failure. It wasn't a failure, you were just contributing to their readiness. And then one of our final thoughts is picking up on the earlier talk, which is that saying fuck it sometimes is good.
Well, we're getting to the end of a lovely day, and I don't know about any of you, but I'm a little bit tired and probably ready for a glass of wine too. So,
Really nice.
but yeah, I joined this group because they were laughing a lot, and I sat down and they were all talking about crying. Now, I didn't say this because there wasn't room, but I'm a big crier myself. My family always still makes jokes about it because when we went to see The Color Purple, I started crying when the credits came. So I think laughter is also a really important part of this. Is sometimes you just have to laugh. You know, like the president. I wrote to the president of my university last week, reminding him that we still don't have a community-based learning center, and we really, you know, we are in North Philadelphia, and you are about to build a stadium. And his response was one line: higher tuition brings benefits as well as costs. Now, I'm a literary critic originally, so I know how to read impenetrable text. And what he meant is, if you want students to work for poor people, go work at Haverford or Bryn Mawr, where they charge big tuition, so they can afford centers of learning. Well, you've got to laugh, because the stupidity is overwhelming. And it's going to come back in his face, because the community is going to be so pissed off when they build that stadium. and they're pretending that somehow nobody's going to notice. Right? So really, I mean, you know, but it's hard to laugh along. So you really, that's what I think one of the things that we've really demonstrated all day today. Part of what I want to say in this too is that nobody's really said, but I bet everybody in here does, is we pay a lot of dues. You know, I spent a lot of time on committees that I don't have a particular interest in. But when I started university writing director, I averaged 18 committees a year. And sometimes you just got to do it because in the end, it's not just that they owe you, although they do, but it's that you know stuff. You know stuff that not a lot of people know because you put up with these things that are, I always like to think of them as the most interesting, boring committees, right? Committees where they're talking about things like the school calendar or, you know, just little things like that. But you find out all kinds of very cool things that you can't learn any other way. And your colleagues who are really too busy to learn how to use the photocopy machine and all that you know, they don't learn that stuff. And suddenly you turn a corner and say, you mean the provost does that? You mean they can do that? You know, well, yeah, if you listen to me. You know. So I think that's part of this too, is that we just hang around a lot. And we are tuned to relationship in such a way that we can read impenetrable texts and we can read why somebody might want to do something that we like them to do, because this whole thing of leverage, it's not just that we know where they got their Jaguar, but it's that we can understand how to push buttons because we know the buttons are there. So it is just you know, I said when I coached Little League, I used to say to my students, my kids, I say, you know, I love hanging out with you guys at the end of a game, and I just love hanging out with you all. This is just really, really fun. So thanks. Have a really good evening, and let's keep talking. We have some. Yes.
I'm going to end the mundane, so sorry, parking tomorrow. I think everybody has noticed that we have our homecoming football game tomorrow, Colorado, Arizona. Yes, no. So, if you're taking the shuttle in the morning, you're set.
Our conference,
Okay. All right, so I'm a font of misinformation, except I know that parking will be a nightmare tomorrow. So, have you, there has been notices then about parking passes and all that kind of thing? Okay, so just, if you have specific questions, come ask me, and I will find out, because I know that I will find out. So, have a wonderful evening.